billing. We're joined by Councilor Lovejoy Grinnell, President Helen Hudson, Councilor at Large Khalid Bey, and Councilor at Large Tim Rudd. My name is Steve Thompson. I'm the Public Safety Chair. What we're going to do is to have Chief Mons give us an overview of his proposal.
Okay.
Give us a little history, give us where you stand now, and then I'd like to hear also from afterwards law, and we're going to give time for people a couple of, about 4 minutes for responses from people in the audience. So make sure you sign in, and we'll get to that when we get to it.
Okay, good morning. I'm Michael Mons. I'm the fire chief.
Chief, could you speak right into the...
Good morning. I'm Michael Mons. I'm the fire chief. I have a bunch of people on our fire department team here with me. And today I'm coming to talk to you about billing for our ambulance transport service and for rescue services. 911 callers call to get emergency transport, to have an ambulance come and take them to the hospital in the city many times throughout the year. Right now in the city, there are 2 private ambulance companies. There are several ambulance companies outside of the city, and we as a Syracuse Fire Department, we have our own ambulance that we have been utilizing for many years. The fire chief has a discretion on how the ambulances are dispatched in the city. So right now, AMR does the bulk of our transports in the city. When there is no ambulance available, our SFD ambulance takes a call. TLC is next on the list, and then we get mutual aid from outside of the county. So we've been transporting patients for many years. Last January when I was appointed, I started looking into this relatively early on into my appointment as fire chief. I had some questions from many counselors about why we're not billing, so we immediately dove into figuring out why we needed to do it, and it was something that I think that we're providing a service that everybody else is getting revenue from, that we should be doing the same thing. So I'm just asking for your support on moving this legislation forward at the next Common Council meeting. I have a couple different ordinances from different cities who are already doing this type of work. I'll pass those out. So there are different municipalities, just like the city of Syracuse, that have the same types of legislation that I'm proposing at the next Common Council meeting. And also, I'm going to provide you with information regarding the amount of transports that happen in the city of Syracuse amongst all the private ambulance companies, and how many transports that the city of Syracuse has done in 2017 and 2018. And if we would have gotten paid for those transports, how much money we possibly could have generated for a service that we're already providing. So right now we're providing the service I'm not sure why we weren't billing before, but if we were to move this legislation forward, we'll be leaps and bounds ahead of where we're at right now, doing the same type of service we're already providing. So I'll hand that out right now. So if you have any questions, I can answer any questions, or if you need me to be more clearer about anything else.
Well, why don't you go over, Chief, first of all, go over the stats on you just passed out here.
Okay.
So that everybody can hear.
So this stats I'm giving you right now is from 2017 and 2018. So with AMR being the primary transport agency in the city, there were still 1,800 calls that needed to be answered. The fire department in 2017 answered 263 of those alarms, and in 2018 we responded to 107 of those alarms, and then subsequently there were a total in 2017, a total of 1,079 alarms that weren't answered by AMR, and in 2018 there were 380 alarms. So I think there's room for our ability to transport.
And were these alarms that you responded to?
These were alarms that we responded to. On the second and third page is a projection if we would have billed for those alarms in 2017 and 2018, if we got the maximum amount of money for those transports, we would have generated $223,635. And then there's different pay rates. So if we would have gotten 60% of those returns, we would have had an estimate possibly around $87,000 for that year for those transports we had over. That's just for 200 transports.
So now, Chief, you're not looking to compete with the AMR and
No, we're already providing the service. Right now, I'm just asking the bill for what we're doing. Like I said, there's room for other alarms to be answered, and I think we're in a position to take some more alarms. But right now, I just want to bill for the work that we're doing right now, because we've been doing it for several years before I became the chief, that we transported citizens to the hospital and we're not getting any revenue, and we just want to be able to make some money to recover our costs for our consumables that we spend on these types of things. So.
Good question.
I'm unclear on from whom you would be collecting this money. So I understand to some extent there's medical, when there's medical calls, there's insurance billing. But for the other things, what are you expecting?
Can you repeat the last part of your question?
Yeah, so for a medical call,
Yes.
I understand there's insurance that can be billed that
Yes.
has not historically been billed. So
Yes.
I get that part. But for example, the EMS apparatus and equipment, this, I don't know if you didn't reference this handout.
So that is all those things are billable under FEMA, and we have state laws for spills and responding to alarms where there are different hazards that our fire department, we're highly trained. We have the experience that is very rare in the area. We have a lot of people throughout the area that can do this, but as far as a department or a team that responds to rescue calls or hazmat calls, we currently are the hazmat team for the whole Onondaga County and Madison County and Oswego County. So when we get dispatched, we're just looking to recover our consumables that we're utilizing on these alarms, that we are going on these calls regardless. When somebody needs our help, we're going, and
But from whom is my question? Who does FEMA reimburse you? Is that what you're saying?
No, FEMA doesn't. It's
okay.
The federal statute says the spiller or whoever is responsible
okay.
for the actual hazard that got released, they're the people that we're going to bill the insurance companies.
Okay, so for that situation of the hazardous spill, then the company or the person responsible or the company responsible would be billed.
Yes.
But for non-medical transport, where there's fire equipment that is used, are these other cities billing, and do you anticipate billing? You know, if I'm in a car accident with President Hudson and there's no medical issues, but you need to, do you need to use some equipment? Do you imagine billing whoever is responsible for that traffic accident?
Yes, for certain things. When there's spills, we go on car accidents all the time. When there's spills on the ground, those are things we're going to try to recoup our costs for, our equipment, our personnel, all of our consumables that we needed to rectify that spill. And like I said, there's a New York State statute. There's federal statutes that say that whoever is responsible for the spill is responsible to pay back the people responding to mitigate that hazard. So we do it all the time. I talked to the commissioner in a city west of us, and they are doing it. They're looking into it. A city to the east of us, they're billing for the same exact things. And as far as the medical billing and all this billing, we're anticipating going with a third-party biller to do all the billing, so it won't be a burden on us, and they have all the legal qualifications and authority to collect all the fees for us.
So I think I can understand the medical insurance part, but and to some extent it seems very different, but I can get the rationale and the logistics of billing a private company that's responsible for a hazardous materials spill. But what seems very different and potentially has a lot of collateral consequences is when you're trying to bill an individual person where there's no medical insurance component, but you're trying to bill an individual person because they had a car accident or
We're planning to bill the insurance companies.
You imagine that the car insurance companies will pick those up, and that's what happens in other states or other jurisdictions?
Yes, that's the plan. That is the
Has it actually happened? I mean,
when the other cities are billing for these, they're billing their insurance companies of the people responsible for the spills or responsible for the hazard that we're going to mitigate. So it's not the individual, it's the person's insurance that we are going to go and collect the revenue from.
Do we have any information about what's happened to insurance rates, et cetera, or has this been done anyplace? I'm just thinking about, we know that low-income people are already at risk of having predatory insurance rates for car insurance. And it's also true that low-income folks often have more calls for service.
Are you referring to the ambulance transports, or are you referring to the rescue and hazardous materials responses?
Rescue and hazardous materials response.
Okay, so just to give you a little bit of background, so our city, our fire fatality rate in the city is very high. Right now, we're probably at 3 times the national average of fire fatalities in the city, and fire response is really our major. We take that very serious. We respond to motor vehicle accidents. We respond to all different types of hazards. We're an all hazards fire department. So over the last 22 to 25 years, we've lost 88 budgeted positions. That, if you can do the math, it's a lot of money that our fire department has given up. Over the last 22 years, there were 11 apparatus that we should have bought that we did not buy, that right now our fleet is in a, we're getting it back to where we need to be, but we've been in a state of needing to upgrade. When I became the chief, our rescue company, who they need to be in a heavy rescue vehicle, they were operating out of 2 pickup trucks. So right from the beginning, I'm trying to figure out a way to turn the narrative around so we can provide these services without being a tax burden on the people who are receiving these services. So that's really why we're trying to go, and we're not trying to make a profit. We're just trying to recover some costs that we're spending to do these services, because we really can't make any more cuts that they've done over the last 20 years. And I know it's a team effort based, with the council working and all the different administrations, but our fire department, you guys sit on the council, you see all the challenges, you see all the great things. Our fire department is one of the greatest things our city has, and I just want to make sure we are able to fund it. And that's kind of where, when you're asking me why do I want to do this or how are we going to go about doing it, that's the basis of moving forward, is so when somebody calls 911, we're able to go provide our life-saving services. And if you go back over these last 18 months, we've saved multiple people's lives with conjunction with the ambulance companies. But we are finding people in smoky conditions that they shouldn't survive. But because our high level of training for our medical and our fire response, we're starting care as soon as we find these people up in elevators, up in stairwells, and we're taking them downstairs. So we can't make any more cuts to our fire department, and this is an effort to move forward to try to turn the narrative around. When the budget comes around next year, you're not looking to see where we can cut from the fire department, because
I think we all agree with all of that. I'm just trying to understand in terms of who we're recovering this money from.
From the insurance companies.
So what percentage do you imagine will be billed to medical insurance versus car insurance? Do you have any way to guesstimate that?
I don't have that. We've been working with multiple third-party billers. I have a representative here who could speak about that. If you'd like, he can come up and talk about that whole process. That's why we're going to delegate that to somebody else, because that is what we'll be paying him to do. Would you like him to come up and speak?
No, we got some other questions first.
All right.
Councilor Bay.
I appreciate it. Good morning, Chief. I have a number of questions, and hopefully some clarity can be provided by you or someone else. So my first question is, what's the potential cost difference for taxpayers? When you're talking about a city ambulance service versus the current service, and if there is or is not a difference, do you have anything that can demonstrate that?
So currently there's many opinions about this topic. Right now, the private ambulance service in our city is unregulated. Other cities, most municipalities, there's regulation on. There's some type of contract between the municipality and the private ambulance provider, which for years we've never had one. Our city's never had any type of contract or any type of, some cities have RFPs, or they have different types of contracts with the private ambulance company. So as far as our fire department responding, we're already doing it. We have firefighters on duty. They're highly trained. There's low turnover. There's many reasons why we should be doing this.
All right, so only thing I'm interested in this respect is numbers, to be quite frank.
Okay.
So I need to know if there's a price difference to taxpayers. And I want to be clear, maybe I should have started this way. As fiduciary agents, our job is to assure that their quality of life and their ability to maintain their cost of living is reasonable.
Yes.
Right? And government, with all due respect, can't be the cause of putting people in the poorhouse. So
Yep.
I need to make sure that there's no cost difference. And if there is a cost difference, that you can demonstrate that there's a benefit to the taxpayer as opposed to something that could be a potential increased liability. Does that make sense?
Yep. So right now, we're already paying for the service. We're already providing it at no fees. When we don't respond in an ambulance, one of these other ambulance companies are going and they are billing. So we're just trying to get the same thing everybody else is doing for what we're already providing.
I understand that.
And the firefighters are on duty. The personnel are already cross-trained. They're on duty. They're already being paid for.
What does this mean for, all right, so you're saying that there would be no increase, but just for what you have in place, you're trying to get.
We're just trying to bill and turn the narrative from providing these services that other private places are getting revenue from, that we're just trying to get revenue from that.
Yeah, I understand that. So you already have an ambulance.
We already have an ambulance. We have 2 ambulances, but one is in service all the time. So when there's a 911 call and one of the private ambulances can't respond, we respond.
I understand that. So there's no interest in increasing the number of ambulances you have.
Right now, we're just trying to get an avenue to bill for what we're already doing. So there won't be any increase in any cost for what's been going on over the last 5-6 years so far.
What could it potentially mean for overtime increases?
There's really none for that right now. Right now, there's a program in place. It depends on, there's many different ways we can do that, but there's different types of fire-based EMS transports that we could do. But right now, the way the system is, like I said, it's unregulated. We're just going to respond to calls when we get it, and I just like to pay for those bills. There's different things that were brought up in the state finance restructuring board about having a contract. So
yeah, I saw that.
Yep, to make sure that the ambulance responders are going to all the calls, and if they're going to all the calls, then there might be a need for us to go to less, but there might be an opportunity for us to go to more.
I understand. We had this conversation years ago, long before this recent report from the state. My concern, and maybe this information could be provided later if it's not in your possession or anybody's possession now, is the potential increase to taxpayers, if any, potential overtime increase, if any, because there's always a potential for that, and if there's a potential for increase in manpower in order to run that operation, in a way, because I'm assuming that I'm expecting that some of these services maybe change or have some adjustment because of a focus on.
Currently, we're just planning on doing what we've been doing the last 4 or 5 years, just to start billing for that. And as we move forward to try to make, more economic development in the city, eventually we're going to have to look to do different things with the fire department to protect the city. And the firefighters, to your point, the firefighters are already on duty and I know you guys know over the last fiscal year, we've reduced the overtime to the lowest point it's been in many, many years, and I got my eye on that type of stuff. And as we move forward, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense. But what we've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years doesn't make sense to me, that we're not billing for services that we're already providing.
Well, see, the problem with that idea is you now have to make sense out of charging the taxpayer twice. See, I understand the idea of billing for a service, but we already fund the fire department to provide the service.
Yes.
So why would we pay you twice for what we already fund you to do? Does that make sense?
Yes, but they're already paying that. When we don't respond to that ambulance call, the private companies are getting paid for those. Or
I understand that
billing.
perfectly. But we don't fund their operation.
I understand that, but some levels of reimbursement are had from other state fund. There's government money involved in all the operations that go on throughout the state, whether it's private or
we understand that too.
public.
But the bottom line is, as a taxpayer, I'm not paying you twice.
Yes.
So
I understand that.
So there's going to have to be some justification for why taxpayers need to pay you twice when they already fund your entire operation.
Well, it's
It's not a matter that, all right, so when a private service is offering a service, we get that. But we don't underwrite their entire operation. We do yours, though.
I
You
understand.
understand? So why would we give you money twice if we already, you understand, if we don't fund the ability for you to have an ambulance, then it's not
It's
there.
not there.
So
But-
we're going to pay for that, pay for those people who run them, but then pay you again
Yep.
for what we already paid you for.
All right, and there's a couple points to that. First, just having that ambulance. If we didn't have the ambulance, we wouldn't have the high level of paramedics on our department that go to 550 Clinton when we're pulling that guy who was deaf. There was a fire upstairs in the on the I believe, I forget, 13th floor, I believe. Because our ambulance and because of the paramedic program that we have had in place, we start providing that high level care right when we're right in the middle of the fire. And that guy had his life saved because of our paramedics bringing that guy down, starting the care earlier. Second, to your point, as far as double billing the residents, I guess my take on that would be regarding this topic was, it's like you guys as the Common Council have been doing Common Council meetings forever, for years. This year you started streaming, okay? You guys started streaming these meetings for free on YouTube. If other cities started to do that, I'm not sure if they're doing it, but say if ESPN wanted to give you a contract for streaming your content, you've been doing it for free, you've been giving it to the taxpayers for free, but if there's revenue on the table for you to do the same thing you're doing, why not go and reach for those opportunities?
I can agree with that, Chief. The problem is that might be a little bit of a shot in the foot, and I'm going to give you an example. The taxpayer already pay us to sit here and provide services and to watch their money. So imagine if we then charge them separate fees for constituent services.
I
You
understand.
understand? It's exactly the same as far as I'm concerned. Let me move on to another question, or maybe a statement leading to another question. Because one thing none of us will ever question, obviously, is the value of the services that the fire department provides. But you have to understand that we're not talking about the services you provide. We're talking about our ability, i.e. the taxpayer's ability, to pay for it. So when you live in a city where the per capita income rate is barely over $22,000, you have to understand why you had to make budget cuts. It's not about us being stingy with money. It's about the fact that the city doesn't generate any. We borrow most of our money. We lean on the state and the Fed for most of our money. We are not an operation that generates the majority of revenue on the ground, which is a practice we have to get back to. There's nobody in here that can argue against that fact.
Can you repeat that fact one more time?
We don't generate enough money, man.
That
80% of government revenue comes from working people. So when, according to that state report, you got 10.7% unemployment, not that joke they keep putting in the paper that the Syracuse area is down to 3.6%, but they're including 2 or 3 other counties. But the city proper is at 10.7% unemployment. That is well over 10,000 unemployed, able-bodied people, and those are only the people we're aware of because they apply for work. That's not counting the many who don't even apply for work. All right? When you look at 25 and older, that's up as high as 14%. You're talking about 20,000 able-bodied people who are not working. You consider the per capita income rate, you have to understand. What I often wonder is why we don't seek to do programs that can be supported by the ability we have. If we only generate so much revenue, then our decisions should be based on the ability of our taxpayers to pay. We shouldn't be really coming up with ideas that's going to further put people in the poorhouse. We have tax delinquency problems. We have unemployment, as mentioned. We have people who can't pay insurance, despite the fact that in some instances they probably should have it, right? But we're going to increase the burden in some way, not saying that the reasons aren't valid or not, because I got to be clear about that. I'm not questioning whether the reasons are valid. But
the bottom line is it's going to cost
bottom
more money
line
for
is you
some
got
people.
per capita income rate 22,000, median income rate just over 32,000. We are not rolling in the dough like that to keep passing on fees to taxpayers.
Okay, I understand.
Okay.
And some of these people that are receiving these services aren't city residents also. I mean, Some of them are, some of them aren't. And
I
you
hear
never
that, but
know
they don't
till-
pay taxes here, so, and I don't represent them.
Oh, I understand, but I'm just saying some of these calls that possibly will be billed might not be to who you're speaking to, that I totally understand what you're saying. And like I said, my whole goal with this, if everybody as a city, and, I've been working with the administration and the corporate council for 18 months trying to get everything lined up to try to generate some revenue. I mean, because as long as we're getting enough funds to protect our city, I just want to have what we need to protect our city, but I understand the fiscal needs of our city. I grew up in neighborhoods that are the poorest neighborhoods in the city, so I totally understand where you're coming from.
We grew up in the poorest neighborhoods in the city.
Yep. And I just want to make sure that I'm doing my part to try to throw on the table that there's revenue to be generated, and I'm all for trying to get to that point now as a common council or as the city government as a whole. If we don't want to go in that direction, I'm fine, but I just want everybody to understand that we got to fund our fire department to be able to protect our city, and I know you totally
Have
understand
people
that.
in your city to
Chief,
protect them.
we're going to have to move on here.
Okay.
Wait, hold on. Hold it. We're going to move on.
Okay.
There, other counselors have questions. We're limited in time, and we have other speakers we have to get
This
to,
is our house. We can stay here forever.
and we may.
Yes, we can.
President Hudson had a question.
And mine is just a little piggyback on Councilor Bay and Councilor Lovejoy Grinnell, because, okay, let's say we charge it out to the insurance company. What is going to be the balance that the patient is going to end up paying?
That stuff is originally the question that you're asking for. We're going to bill everybody equally, whatever the total bill is, and depending on the services provided, everybody's going to get billed equally.
I know it's equally, but I do know that the ambulance service, AMR, whoever, it's always a balance sent to the patient because insurance doesn't pay it all.
Can you repeat that last point that you said?
I know that with AMR and other ambulance services, when they bill the insurance, there's always a balance for the patient.
Yes. And that would be in a policy we would work with a third party to figure out, but I'd get your input if you guys want to move this billing forward. I'm more than happy to sit down and make sure it's what everybody wants to do as far as retrieving that money that is owed.
Okay, because I know you said insurance, but insurance will cover some of it, but insurance will not cover the full balance of that. So just put that out there.
The full balance of what?
Full balance of the ambulance ride. If the ride is $900, insurance is going to pay part of it, and the patient is going to be responsible for the other part.
Yes.
Okay, Councilor Kearney.
So just to sort of piggyback off of what Councilor Bay was saying, I understand and I can appreciate that, we're going in and, it's already almost tied in with the service that we provide because we have the ambulances. But my question is then, do we have a solid number on how many calls we actually report to with our ambulance and go and respond to non-city residents? Is this it's on here?
No, non-city residents are
No, it doesn't have that information on there.
Because, look, I get the fact that you don't want to say, okay, we're not going to charge city residents additional funds for, doing what they believe we provide, but, I mean, the number's got to be pretty big as to who's not, between SU games, the mall, things like that, it's, yeah, people, yeah. What was the number consensus throughout? What is it, 70% of the people leave the city every day that come in? So, along with that,
What's your? I didn't understand.
do we have an actual number of how many times we, as the Syracuse Fire Department,
Responded to a
with
non-city
an ambulance
resident?
to a non-city resident?
I don't have that information right now, but I believe I can get that information.
Okay, because I would be curious to see how big that number actually is, and then along with that, I'm not sure about this, but it seems like just at least in our area, other cities, even though they're smaller, seem to be trending away from having their own ambulance services. Like I think Oswego a few years ago got rid of theirs.
Well, they still have their ambulance. Actually, cities are. Everybody has mixed opinions about it.
Okay.
There's cities, there's fire departments all over the state providing this service. Utica, Lions Falls, Fayetteville, right in our backyard. Fayetteville is providing the service. Manlius. People are doing it all over the state. Binghamton, Amsterdam. I mean, I can give you a list of places that are doing it. Plattsburgh, New York City has a totally funded EMS division that they provide this service. And like I said, I'm just bringing this to the table. I've done a lot of research. I've spent a ton of time on this, and a lot of this came from Councilor Ryan when he was asking about the situation, and we looked into it. And I've been talking with Councilor Thompson about just figuring out a way to bring it to the table. Now, I've done a ton of homework. A bunch of my team has done a bunch of homework, and collectively, if this is something that you don't believe is somewhere we should go, I mean, I respect your opinion on it. And but other cities are doing it. Other cities are collecting revenue, and a lot of times when we're looking at different processes that we're doing, sometimes we don't look to other areas to the east or west, and we may look, but we don't implement some of the things that they're doing. And this is just something that I've done a lot of work to try to bring this to the table so we can have a source of revenue. The rescue and hazmat calls, there's federal statutes that say that we should already have been doing that, getting our costs recovered for all the consumables, that we are going to mitigate these hazards. As far as the ambulance billing, we're just trying to, like I said, we're already paying for the service. We're already doing it. I'm just trying to, it's money that's just out there for us. It's low-hanging fruit. And I know some of these taxpayers are already paying taxes to fund the fire department, and it's like the water department. And I'm not comparing apples to apples. I know this is apples to oranges, but everybody pays for a water service to your home. But when you use water 5 times more than the next person, your bill is a little bit higher. I mean, and it's to help provide some of the services that are provided. But I wanted to come to you and work on figuring out if this is something you want to do or you don't want to do. I respect your opinion, and I'm just here to try to bring these things.
Thank you, Chief. Councilor Rudd.
There's a lot of talk about revenue. If I have a business and I bring in a lot of revenue, if my costs are higher than my revenue, it still doesn't generate any money. And government is not a business, so it doesn't have to be that way. And I'm not inherently opposed to government mimicking businesses at times to help fund services. But in general, if a market works, you probably let the market work. But so on this, the context, in my opinion, is from the Financial Restructuring Board, and they made a recommendation of, look, you have this ambulance, it goes out, it answers calls, you don't bill. So either bill or get out of the business. So you don't really describe the cost. Like, we have the revenue here. I would sort of assume the cost is actually probably higher than the revenue, although bringing in the revenue for the service we're choosing to do, I think could make sense. But I would be interested to see what we currently spend on the ambulance service, how that compares to this revenue.
Yeah.
And then, like, with that in mind, let's just pretend that the cost is higher than the revenue we would get. I've heard the articulation of value from having the fire department provide, having some kind of ambulance presence just in case there was ever the need to have service. But in general, can you speak a little bit about the cost? And then I really think this has to be about, people call us with all the things that are broken in the city, and I think we get quite a few calls about different things that are broken, and I don't get a lot of calls about the fire department being broken or the ambulance service being broken, so I don't want to break it, right? So I can see, let's try to maintain sort of the status quo, but do what makes financial sense, which is probably to bill. It seems, as a citizen, I know that if I call the fire department, I'm not getting a bill to come. And if I call an ambulance, I'm pretty sure I'm going to get a bill because most people get billed. So if the city if you're in the 1% of people who get a city ambulance, then you get a free ride. Like that part,
Yep.
I'm okay billing. But can you speak to costs? And then I would really say, I think this is maintenance of the status quo. And then unless something crazy happened, we would not be looking to expand our service because I think it would lose money overall. It would just mean more taxes without actually revenue that would cover the service.
The personnel are on duty. We can go to a situation.
Chief, can you tell us how many people are assigned to that?
Right now, it's we have a couple different programs that we have that operate the ambulance, and right now they're stationed out of Bellevue Ave. There's 4 people there. When there's a 911 call that comes into the city that there's not a private ambulance AMR available, then we respond on that call. So they're already on duty. If that group of people don't get a call for an ambulance, they're available to take other calls. They go to fires, they do everything else everybody else is doing. So they're already on duty getting paid for the responses that we're doing in the ambulance service that we're transporting currently. As far as the, I know you say you get calls from constituents, and I think we do a really good job of hiding the struggles that we have internally to provide the service that we have, the budget that we have, trying to make that work, the reduction of manpower, the reduction of 93% of our people are on the fire trucks. The staff that we have working behind desks is very minimal, and we have people doing tons of different jobs that should be more than just one or two people doing. They're doing 5 or 6 different things. So I know people don't see that. They see when we get on scene and we're throwing ladders and we're bringing people out of windows, or they see some of the heroic and brave things that we're doing, but there's a lot that goes into the finished product on a fire ground or on an emergency scene that people don't see, that our deputies all the way down to our rookie firefighters are preparing to make sure that we can respond to all these alarms. When there's a fire that's more than just a one-room fire, it reduces our manpower right in half, and trying to...
People on the ambulance count in whatever ratio it is for the number of people we need on duty to respond to fires?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they do.
So you think of it as kind of a low marginal cost of...
I mean, they're cross-trained, they're on duty. They know the neighborhoods. They work in these neighborhoods for 20 years. They know where they're going. They know the people, and they're on duty already.
What's the value add you would describe of having the one ambulance on duty all the time? Since it seems like we could, like they're describing one option of eliminate the service. And just
Well,
let it be.
there's places that are making, out in Fayetteville, they've gone on almost 2,200 calls and they've generated almost $1 million, but they have people on duty that there are going to be costs to it, but the costs are invaluable to the people that we're able to get to and help when they call for 911. I don't know how else to put that to you, or can you ask the question differently so I can give you a better answer? Or what's your specific question? As far as the people that are on duty, they're already on duty.
You say that you're going to generate $86,000 more money by billing.
On those calls that we had for the 1 year.
So I would say, how does that compare to the cost? I would guess the cost of I know you're saying it's kind of a sunk cost because we're paying for this for fire protection, but like there has to be some number. So let's just say it's $100,000, the cost. So we're just $14,000 that's not covered. So like if we're just numbers, just dollars, then we would say don't do the service. Like let the market, let the...
Yeah, we go into a contractor and let...
So what's the value from the fire department's perspective that makes it so we should spend more than we're getting in revenue?
So the way we're doing things, for the most part, there's always room for improvement, but we are so efficient with the resources we have, and that money that I passed around, that's the salary of a brand new firefighter with the benefits. I mean, that's paying for one of those 4 guys that are over at that fire station, or one of the gals over there that are at that fire station. That's one whole budgeted position based on just those alarms were going on, that they're already on duty.
Councilor
And we could go on more alarms. We can make as much money as we moved into it, and there always will be that conversation of, can we do it as cheap as somebody else? But there's pros and cons to both of those situations.
Let me clarify this first. But the purpose is not that. The purpose is just you're doing a service and you're saying, we just want to bill for that service. That's
Yes.
it. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So not anything. Go ahead, Councilor Beck.
I just want to maybe make a comment about what most of us already know. I don't believe there's anybody in here, and if you disagree, please raise your hand, that will seek to or even haphazardly acquire more expenses than the amount of revenue they bring in. I'm pretty sure you factor in your and or your family's revenue potential when you consider the cost of maintaining your home. Now, the fact that we would come here in this house metaphorically and ignore our revenue potential because it's not coming out of our personal pocket, I think is negligent. It's always been the character of government. We've had increased costs even as our population decreased over the last, I don't know how many years. And I'm going to attribute all of that to questionable management. I don't care who the administration was. If the intent is to improve quality of life, and certainly I don't doubt that that is the effort, and I'm speaking generally. This is not a shot at the fire department, who does an excellent job. It's not a shot at our police department or anybody else, but we have to give consideration. And if you won't gamble in your own household, don't gamble in anybody else's. I think that's fair.
And to your point, Councilor Bay,
Counselor,
when I came in, I realized that the way the ambulance was operating, that I needed to do all this research to bring it to the table to say that there's an opportunity to generate some money from it. There's an opportunity to, and that's really my intent of it was, to your point, they've been doing it this way for a long time before I was a decision maker. I got in this position. I realized that there's opportunity to do things a little bit better and to turn the narrative in a positive manner. And I know there's other issues, but
Chief, one thing we understand, and I want you to understand that, is appreciated. We all put ideas on the table. It doesn't mean they're always good, right? Or it doesn't mean that they're always timely. And all we're saying is, a lot of times the ideas we put on the table don't fit our ability as a city. That's all it is. So it's just like me coming in your house, or that letter you get from Spectrum every month telling you to increase and buy another bundle. Right? You can't cover that cost. It's a trick. It's something that you're not learning about. Not saying we're tricking people, but that people are always selling to make you spend more money. It's a little crazy, though, that sometimes government is always causing the people to spend more money, even if that's not their intent, right? So it's not saying that anybody's effort is malicious. We have ideas to make programs more efficient. But when it comes down to it, and I want to point this out, too, what we're providing is not an opinion. I asked for math. Right?
Yep.
So I need to see, right now what I'm hearing is an opinion. But the only thing that qualifies or discredit that opinion is when you show those numbers and answer those questions that I've asked. Right? And that's what it boils down to, is that we need to know, and I want to say this last thing, and this is not the opinion of the rest of this council, right? I know who I work for, with all due respect, and oftentimes we get a lot of opinions from people who live outside the city, whether they work for the city or not. Take it how you want it. If you disregard the people in this city, we're going to disregard what you have to say. It means absolutely nothing to me if you don't care about the fact that these people in this city are struggling to pay their cost of living every single day.
Counselor,
Just two quick
Go ahead.
clarifications. Chief Mons, I attended your award ceremony in May, and I'm incredibly impressed by the skill, and I think that there's incredible skill, particularly in medical and paramedics and EMTs on your force, and I think that regardless of what that cost is and whether we can bill for that, it is, as you said, critically important that the fire department is able to provide that high level of paramedic and EMS response as part of the fire department, and that we not outsource that to private companies. And I'm with you with that, and I think that that's a value. I think two questions I have. One is, it's totally luck, right? I don't. If I'm calling 911, it's totally luck whether I get AMR or TLC or the city at this point, right?
From
my perspective, I mean, not luck.
Yeah, you don't know who's going to come.
And I can't choose it, right? So
Can't choose it.
So if I mean, in a legal term, I'm getting unjust enrichment essentially by if I happen to call and the city responds, city fire department ambulance responds, I'm lucky that I don't get the billing to my insurance, but I had nothing to do with that, right?
Exactly.
And if TLC had responded, I would have had to pay that copay, right?
Exactly.
So
yes.
to me, it's a no-brainer that we're going to charge for ambulance service. Like if everyone else is providing, we're going to recoup some of those costs. I think getting out of this business is crazy because we do have highly technical, highly specialized staff who have been doing this. I think it makes no sense to get out of this business when we have that skill level. But to me, it makes sense to segregate this legislation. You have given us some materials about ambulance and rescue billing. There's not very much here in the materials that I've seen related to hazmat or the technical assistance that you spoke about today, and other jurisdictions doing that. That I find much more problematic because what we're doing in terms of our ambulance is already duplicated by private companies that are already recouping the costs. All we're doing is recouping costs. That's to me a no-brainer. We should be doing that. But these others, hazmat and technical rescue, I think need a lot more exploration, and I don't think that they should be lumped in the same legislation because I just don't think it's been hashed out enough to understand what the other consequences are, because we are the only provider. To me, it's very different because we are the only provider of technical rescue and hazmat versus we are one of 3 providers of the ambulance. We're providing the exact same, I would say better, but we're providing a similar or equivalent service in the ambulance.
Well, there's already federal and state laws to recoup our money for going on those specific types of alarms, those hazardous materials calls. So I'm just trying to get the city law legislation to make it authorized through the Common Council and through the city administration. So when we're going on these alarms, we're, you know how the costs that we're using to actually mitigate the hazard. There's already, the FEMA has a pamphlet on how you recoup these costs, and we're just trying to follow those and do it legally through the council.
I hear you, but you haven't provided any, and maybe it's just that we don't have it yet, but
Yes.
what other cities or municipalities are doing. The ambulance, no brainer, I get it. But this hazmat and the technical assistance, we don't have any materials on it. We haven't really gotten into any of the technicalities of that and who's going to be billed and what the consequence is and whether they actually can recoup it. I think that's a wholly different category of billing. I love that you're thinking about it and that we're working toward it, but to me, the ambulance billing, I think we should be able to move forward with. These others, I think, need a little more expiration. Respectfully, that's my opinion. Again, not
Thank
speaking
you.
for the council.
President Hudson.
Yeah, just want to piggyback a little bit, Chief. So, you know how when you use your insurance and you go to the doctors, and when you present that insurance, they take whatever the insurance pays them.
Yes.
Is that going to be the case here? That you'll just bill it out and whatever the insurance company pays, that's it? The constituents don't have that extra burden of costs?
That's what I was working on with corporate counsel to make sure everybody's getting treated the same when we're billing for people. Whatever the policy would be, it would be for everybody getting the same service, the same bills. There are other municipalities that do have low income billing. You know,
I would like to see that, because to me, if they have insurance, be it Excellus or Medicaid or whatever, you bill them out, they say, okay, we're going to give you $400, you're done, then we should be done.
So with this, I'd like to have Law come up and speak to the legal issues. I'd like to say that one of the reasons
issues, man, it's a financial issue.
one of the reasons that there were questions relative to if the state had to approve legislation for this to go forward. So that's what I want. But I just want to say to the councils that the reason that I'm having the meeting now is because the legislation is not written, and I want to get input from councilors so that we can add it to the legislation prior to coming on the agenda. So that's the reasoning for it.
Good morning, Kristen Smith, Corporation Counsel. I am short. So when Chief Mon says that he put in a lot of time and effort on this, that's true. I can confirm that. We've worked with him for months on this. And we did a lot of research under New York State law, general municipal law specifically, as to whether we were actually permitted to bill for these types of services. In the ambulance issue being separate from the hazmat, we looked at them both. After a lot of research, we concluded that we are permitted to move forward with this. We, anecdotally, other cities are doing this. For example, the hazmat side, I know Buffalo does that. I've been in touch with their office. So very comfortable that we're permitted to do this. I'm not, and I don't think any state legislation is needed. I do want to speak in terms of the billing, President Hudson. That is an issue that we are still looking at in terms of how, what we would be obligated to do from a billing perspective if there's anything in insurance law that would require us to approach it in a certain way. So a little bit of an open issue. Would be happy to follow up with the council on that after this meeting. Any specific questions?
So the technical assistance is do you consider that's the same as the hazmat, or do you consider it as a separate issue?
So I consider there's 2 pages there, the ambulance being one issue and the hazmat and technical assistance being a separate issue.
And so you referenced Buffalo as one of the cities that has billed for the hazmat services?
Yes.
And they're including the technical assistance as part of that? Because it seems different to me in my mind, the equipment, the at least what was given to us. But if it's the same, I'm just trying to
Counselor, and really, billing is not the right word. We're just recovering our costs for the consumables that we're spending to go and take care of the hazard. We're not going to make a profit. We're just trying to recoup the money that we're spending to go and mitigate these hazards. There's
I get it. I get it.
I mean, it is billing. Like, let's pretend AMR didn't do their own billing and they hire a company to do the billing. We could hire the same company to do the billing. It would be like the same function. Like,
I mean, it is
provide
billing,
the
but we're doing it just to be able to provide the service and be able to pay for the service, to backfill the service for so when it's needed again, or just to be able to supplement the services that we provide with that service. Those fees that we're looking to generate are going to go right back into providing that service at a higher level. So it's really just a cost recovery instead of I would call it fee. That's how it's termed in the FEMA manual.
I was trying to, I think, appeal to the logic of some people here, but I'm going to have to call a spade a spade. To me, this is nothing but a money grab. With all due respect, while I appreciate opinions, it is not a no-brainer for a senior citizen who may be one payment out of land bank receiving their property, who unfortunately gets a situation where they require ambulance services and they have to pay for their health and can't pay their bill. Now, to sit here and act as if that doesn't happen when we know it does, when we consider the number of people living on a fixed income who cannot pay their cost of living right now, the fact that that can be ignored, I repeat, is negligent. And we are not a gimmick council. It's our responsibility to assure that we're making the best possible decision based on the people's ability and their money. I repeat, I appreciate opinions, but I don't, I think it's a little misguided to call it a no-brainer, because it's not a no-brainer to people who can't pay for the service.
So did we get an answer to hold on, no, we're going to get an answer from Corp Counsel here relative to the question that was asked. And then we're going to move on to
I think the question was about Buffalo and whether they
the
charge for
technical
technical
portion,
responses.
whether the technical is also collected, or is it just hazmat?
I can share with you the statute from Buffalo. They charge for light duty, vehicular,
I handed that
heavy
out,
duty.
Chris,
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Okay.
I also sent everybody this stuff yesterday, so that they
Okay.
would have it in advance.
But they don't have the same technical rescue response category. They call it industrial rescue response.
Yes.
I don't know. I'd have to defer to the chief as to whether the intent was
Yeah,
that that's
it's
the
all
same thing.
it's all the same between the hazmat and technical rescue. We're going to lump it in together to get the cost recovery for both of those services that we provide.
Okay, we're going to go to questions or people that would like to speak. Are there any people that have signed up to speak? Oh, I'm sorry. Councilor Carney has a question before we move.
I guess with Councilor Bay, it's essentially right now a crapshoot of whether you're going to have to pay or not. I guess that's the issue. And I understand what you're saying. I really do. I can appreciate it. It's a service that we're providing, and people have come to expect that. However, you don't know if it's going to be the city showing up and you essentially getting the service for free, or one of the other, AMR, TLC, whoever else we contract out, or will show up. It's...
Yeah, but see, I get that. Even in regards to ambulance services, regardless of where it's coming from, I hear the argument, well, they're charging a fee, why can't we charge the fee? I get that. But I think my position was very straightforward. We don't fund their operation. We do not fund their operation. It's really that simple. So, for the many people who are going to call you on the phone or call you on the phone and ask you when this thing goes public, why would we pay them twice? I'd be interested. I see you shaking your head, but, come on, let's be practical. You don't have the problem, right? You're not facing foreclosure on your home, right? So when you think about those people, understand, we don't work just to come up with gimmicks. We don't work to disregard poor people or moderate income people, who the majority of our city is. They are not well-to-do people with a ridiculous amount of money to keep paying for fees that keep coming out of nowhere just because we want to, like I stated in the last council session, we're very creative, but oftentimes creativity can create a problem for people. We can't be so creative that we create problems for the people we work for. We have to be considerate of the fact that sometimes creativity could be at the expense of taxpayers. We can't do that.
Okay.
I think the question then becomes, how do we determine, and I'm being genuine. I'm actually trying to have a conversation here. How do we determine?
You're having a conversation.
No, I know. How do we determine whether the city's going to someone that's a low-income home that may be facing financial struggles, or some guy that's having a heart attack at the SU game that lives out in Skaneateles.
Well, the fact is simply this. You can determine, well, first of all, people in the city need ambulance services, obviously.
Of course.
Right? So, but I think you can answer your own question when you determine what's the difference between moderate and low-income people versus people who are financially capable that live in the city. I repeat, I don't represent people who live outside the city. I'm speaking for taxpayers who live in the city. And so while we understand somebody in Skaneateles can be at the Dome and they can have some unfortunate incident requiring services, I'm talking about people who live here, who play here, who eat here, who's been here, who's going to be here. Those are the ones who vote us in the office. Not people in Skaneateles, not anybody else outside the city, but the people who put us here, whether they are totally clear on it or not. It's our job to assure that we're putting up safeguards to prevent them from ending up in a situation that they can't handle. So far, I don't think we did a great job.
No, and I agree. My point, I guess, is that I'm trying to make is that guy that lives out in the suburbs is in here. They may just, at luck of the draw, get a city ambulance that then they don't have to pay for. And then someone who's a constituent of mine who may be living paycheck to paycheck and doesn't have two nickels to rub together is getting, the AMR, and they have to actually pay that fee.
So maybe you consider memorializing state legislation to that end, right? We charge fees to people who use our pools that don't live in the city. Yes, we do.
If I got the call on the double billing, I think what I think happens is we are basically shifting the cost in the future. So we're saying we're going to collect the money from the users of the service within the city, and in the future, the burden won't be on the general taxpayer. So while it looks like a double billing, maybe in the shortest term, in the longer term, we're really billing them once. But we're
Allow me
shifting
to
where it
clarify
comes from.
something for people who thought they were correcting me on something. We've had groups that use our pools. The ones outside the city paid us. The ones in the city did not. We voted on it on this council when y'all weren't here. So let me make sure that I speak clearly so you understand what I'm talking about. The bottom line is we have situations where people outside the city pay for services that city citizens don't pay for. And so maybe it's a matter of seeking state legislation to that respect. But I think you're kind of getting beyond the point. Nobody has made an argument against the fact that the people in the city don't generate a lot of money in their own house. I heard no debate in that respect. In fact, I watch people ignore it. Nobody argued against the fact that our median income is just $32,000. I've heard no rebuttal in that respect. The bottom line, nobody argued against the fact that we have how many tax delinquent properties right now? Over 1,000 in the land bank's possession. How many more to go because people can't cover their cost of living? But none of that is a part of the discussion when you talk about increasing their cost for any services that we provide. That's reckless.
Okay. Yes, go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
If there is a way that we can, through the 911 system, begin to delineate, I mean, we all show up at the calls. The first in line may be through luck of the draw, no disparity to any other company, the Syracuse Fire Department. But the next ambulance is still coming, Chief, correct?
Yes, we already are responding to the calls with our mini vehicles.
So there could be multiple vehicles that show up. And at that point, there's a transfer to the private company who then moves on to the hospital.
Yes.
With the individual. And in some instances, depending on the severity of the care being given, because we're the first responders, our firefighters are actually getting in the ambulances, yeah. and because we don't want to continue the life-saving care we're providing. So we're continuing that service with another company because the well-being of the individual is the ultimate responsibility of all of us. And so yep. If there's a way we can figure out, and I don't know how it is because everyone shows up at the same time. You don't want to be at the scene trying to figure out if they're a city resident or not. But you did ask some very, very specific cost and response questions. And Council Bay, we yes, we are absolutely have constituents who have issues paying their own mortgage. And I know I'm broken English right now, but I'm just thinking as I'm talking. The point about us being able to recoup or to bill based on possibly the residency on the call. I don't know. I don't know if it's possible because we all show up at the same time.
Yeah, I would think that it has to be based on the geographic area, and that's within the city, whether you're a city resident or not. I think is what we were looking at. I would suggest that one of the things that we could look at council when we get the legislation is the billing portion, the reimbursement from the individual.
Insurance.
The insurance is the main provider, according to what the chief is saying. We would bill the insurance company would be billed. They would pay whatever they pay.
Right.
And if there were additional costs that were left to the individual, that is a city.
Absolutely.
Well, that's something that can be looked at and either.
That's the issue.
Sliding
Because that
scale,
is
waived,
causing
whatever,
a fee
and
burden.
that's the cost of fee. But
And as a municipality, there are laws that govern what we can have the ability to waive or not. And so that is a concern, absolutely, that non-covered cost.
But I believe that is something that, and the Corporation Council could tell me, that's something that we can waive. We can waive taxes, we can waive, so I don't see why in the legislation that there couldn't be something that would be, I'm not saying waive, I'm just saying that I'm not sure, I would believe that there would be something in the legislation that could be written to be able to.
And to the hazmat, and the chief said it, just to reiterate it, I do see those, they are two different topics. The specific point about the hazmat is that it's consumables you use one time. And so they have to be replaced. And again, taxpayers are paying for a spill in the city, but we're responding everywhere. So that's just a point I wanted.
Deputy Mayor, I think, two things. One, it was the point of my discussion from the beginning that it was about the increased cost to taxpayers or increased burden to taxpayers. So I appreciate that. The other thing, though, when you talked about or you mentioned or re-mentioned, recouping or billing, right? It makes sense from our perspective that if that recouping or billing somehow translates or reaches in some way and benefit taxpayers, right? So, you have, this one person, unfortunately, has a circumstance where they require ambulance services, taxpayer, and that person pays the cost. It seems to me when we talk about, and maybe, I don't want to make any assumptions, but I'll just say what I'm speaking from. When I speak about the money, I don't see it as the city's money because the city gets its money from the people, right? And so if the service doesn't provide a relief in some way, I don't care if it's pennies, then how do you really justify it as recouping, right? The city manages the assets; it doesn't own them. Right, so how do we qualify it as a recouping if the beneficiaries don't see no benefit? That's a business question.
Okay.
I believe that money would go back into making sure we can provide that service to the next person that calls. And like I said, Councilor Bay, I get your point that some people might not be able to afford this, and I think there's a couple different things. Like I said, when I started last year, we had an ambulance. We had to change the narrative on what we were doing with it because of the things we're talking about now. Some of the things the deputy mayor talked about, how our minis respond to all these alarms, all these high priority alarms, and we got private ambulances arriving on scene, and this city's been unregulated with those particular things, and it's never been it was attempted to be addressed by the council with an RFP back in 2010 or 11, and I think we're just trying to make a turn around the corner so we can move in a forward positive step to make sure that the citizens are getting the high level care when they call 911 in their desperate situations, that we're able to provide that service and and we do it
I
in
don't think money in your pocket changes that, man. You know, this is the thing. We keep going into programming as if programming is being questioned. No, well, this is what the chief keeps doing, right? So I don't want to hear about programming. I want to understand what the cost difference is. I'm talking about money,
Yes.
math.
So the
Right.
bottom line is the bottom line of what you asked, and Council Rudd did as well.
Right.
What is our cost, and what is the projected revenue? All of that means nothing when somebody is in a health crisis.
Right.
What is of most importance to me, to the chief, to the administration is, whoever shows up is who shows up through 911. It's the queue of the concern. Everyone's insurance, whether it's Medicaid or private,
We all pay insurance.
is going to get billed.
That's right.
The concern is what is not covered.
That's right.
That's the point.
Well, you-
And if we can waive, then we should absolutely do that.
I agree, and maybe to the point of Council President's question, we understand that if AMR comes, my insurance is going to get billed. I may have a copay. If the firemen come, my insurance is going to bill. I may have a copay. That doesn't change.
Yep.
It's just a concern for increased costs relative to putting more energy into the service. I understand that we're saying we're not going full blown now, but I ain't new to this place. You introduce an idea, then it gets bigger than it was intended, right? I told you we had this conversation before. My questions weren't answered then. So this is not a new conversation for me. I'm speaking for me. I think I'm here longer than everybody else here. They weren't here for that conversation. So, if we asked these questions before and they weren't answered, and then the thing comes back and I still can't see no numbers, what else? I mean, people expect me to rubber, not you, I'm just saying. Expect
Right.
a rubber stamp with no understanding?
No, and you know that I know I can't speak for before and 10 years in the future. But right now, we have one ambulance that's staffed, and we have the capacity, we have another vehicle that's not in rotation. We could put that vehicle in rotation because we have the staff. At what the chief is proposing is that's what we're looking to do. That's what, use those two just to cover the calls that we get, that we, if you all approved it, would bill as any other company that would show up, and then look at, through corporate counsel, not passing any uncovered costs onto the taxpayer.
My last thing here,
Yeah.
because I get that idea.
Okay.
They're paying anyway, why not pay us? Why not leave that as the relief they get if by chance they do get a city fire department? You get my point? Like, why not provide them that breathing room? If by chance, okay, I luck up to get, Syracuse Finest to show up, to help me out. I'm not getting clubbed upside the head. That's that one moment I can smile because I know I'm not getting billed for it. So I get the argument. I get the argument they're paying anyway, so why not? I don't know that that's a good argument, though. I guess that's my point. I don't know that that's a good enough argument.
And there's other two alternatives. One is somehow systematically figuring out residency or not. That is complicated, and
Yeah, it is.
figuring it out. The other is not providing the service.
Right.
So I'd like to, if there are no other questions, bring the committee meeting to a close. But before doing so, I would like to make sure that we have the counselors' questions for the chief so that we can get those answered and get them back. And
Is it public or no?
it is public, and I asked for if anybody wanted to speak, and nobody got up.
He did
So-
raise his hand.
Oh, he did? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Montano, President of Syracuse Firefighters Local 280, that represents the individuals that will be performing this function, so to speak. As president, I'm around the state a lot. I meet with a lot of the presidents from one end of the state to the other, from the north to the south, from FDNY to Buffalo. This is becoming a pretty common practice. With all due respect, Councilor Carney, what happened in Oswego was diminished because of an economic situation, and now they're actually rehiring to put the second ambulance back in service because of the lost revenue. I've done a lot of research on this aspect of things. I knew this was coming forward. I was here in 2010. I got a lot of history on this. And I've asked a lot of questions. I've asked a lot of the questions that Councilor Bay just asked. I spoke to a president out in Amsterdam, New York, where their projected income was a modest $100,000, and they nearly tripled it in the income from a third-party billing system. Those questions came up too, Councilor Bay, about where's this generated from? Those that can pay. And I go, what does that mean? That means there is no bill beyond the insurance bill. So that's lost revenue in my eye. I agree with the councilors here that represent your constituents in the city that, there needs to be a way. But we also need a way. We got some very professional. To be a Syracuse firefighter, the minimum requirement is a certified first responder. 98% of your firefighters are EMT or greater, all the way to the paramedic level. We need some incentive to keep that, especially that paramedic level, which the majority of them are serving the public at the Bellevue Firehouse, Station 3, or in another capacity that's important to all of us as residents and as employees. They do so much extra training that what goes into maintaining that level is extraordinary. What this does, and we support the chief and his deputy chiefs in pushing this forward from a standpoint of the incentive. When you're a paramedic, I'm a paramedic in the Syracuse Fire Department. I work at Station 3. We have an ambulance, but boy, I'm a firefighter. What's the incentive to go that next step? You know what? Provide that service. We provide that service now at no cost to the taxpayer. None whatsoever, with the exception of the labor cost, which is already there, whether they're on the engine or they're on the Mini or they're in the ambulance. I encourage you that there's ways around this, that it's lost revenue and it's time to bring our people on board. We work well with, I see AMR here, I see TLC here. I never understood why we're the only city without an RFP and a contract with one of them. Again, to generate the additional exclusive rights to provide the ambulance service to the city. But again, my point is the incentive level. The incentive to keep our paramedics, keep the citizens safe, just to drive it home, because we all know what goes on at home. Homes are busy now. A lot of these guys don't have the time to do that. But let me tell you something, when they're providing that extra service, maybe that's the incentive that's going to keep them at the level they're at. So I encourage you to again, provide any research we can, any documents we can for you, but there's ways around all your questions. And it's there, and it's a resource, and I think we can accomplish it.
Thank you.
I gotta respond to that. I can appreciate that. I don't know if, I'm gonna be blunt, I'm not gonna incentivize at a taxpayer expense, not me. And I'm gonna be honest, you certainly want to assure opportunity, whether it's related to training, work, and the like. You want people to enjoy and appreciate their work. I'm pretty sure that all of the firemen got involved because they have a care for people, right? It's the same reason why we're involved. There's different types of care, right? What the deputy mayor said is true. If a crisis strikes somebody, they're not thinking about that money, but if they make it home, they will be, right? The other thing I'll say is I keep hearing this argument about what everybody else is doing, and every kid wants a PS4, but every household can't afford one. You gotta be a little bit more practical. I don't think there's been great arguments here myself. I think some of your arguments have worked against you. That's just me being honest. So I think, I can appreciate, I certainly appreciate the perspective, speaking for me, but the bottom line for me is still the same. It's the math that matters to me, right? Because that's what we're responsible for. I hate to say it this way, we're not a feel-good group. You know what I mean?
Do you have the same questions for the professional ambulance service?
So we have Mr.
Fund
Butler.
them, we fund our operation, but I believe I already made that clear.
But the bottom
We
line,
don't have to debate it
Here,
now.
we
man.
gotta- yeah,
Provide
no,
the numbers,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
that's that.
Yeah.
Produce the numbers. Math doesn't lie.
Mr. Butler.
And you show the numbers. That's it.
Councilor Bay, I'm going
Here.
to put together the
I'm not
information
interested in no
that you
more program
requested.
discussion, man, or
Right.
listening to people get upset because I'm defending people who voted me in office.
No, I totally understand.
Bottom line.
Councilor Bay, I'm going to get you all the information and everything that you asked for. I'm going to get you information from the fire chief's office to make sure you have some information and to answer some of your questions.
Thank you.
Let me point something out. My public service is not about my paycheck. It ain't that big. But somehow your arguments often are. Let's be clear about what public service is. If you're not really into public service, then maybe you should find something else to do, man. But there's a bunch of people we work for in this city. And nobody here can say that any of us up here are here for the paycheck. Our paycheck is criminal. We ain't here for the money. We're just here to make sure people can live their life. It's that simple.
Mr. Butler.
Good afternoon. My name is David Butler. I'm the president of TLC, Emergency Medical Services. I'm also the chairman of the United New York Ambulance Network. We represent commercial ambulance industry in New York State. We have 45, I believe it's 45 companies throughout New York City, Albany, Buffalo, all over the place. So the reason I'm up here today is because the Syracuse Fire Department does an outstanding job. We have the best fire department in the country. We also have AMR, who's a great, they're my competitor, and I'm telling you, they do a wonderful job. In TLC, we do a good job. I just have a couple questions for the chief. Chief, what is the percentage that the billing company will charge to do the billing?
We're just trying to get the approval for the billing before we get into the actual third-party billing details.
Okay.
So this is the first step to bring this to the council to see if they wanted to move forward with it. So I have some information, but we're not at that point right to even discuss that until we figure out if we get approved.
But there will be a charge to the city to do the billing.
Certainly
You agree
will.
on that?
Yes.
Okay.
What percentage do you spend on billing?
I'm sorry?
What percentage of your fee do you spend?
I can't tell you that because we're under contract.
I knew you wouldn't tell me.
We used to do our own billing, but it's so complicated that we sub it out to somebody else. Medicaid and Medicare will pay you just so much money, and you have to hit, I'm sure you understand that Medicare only pays 80%. You have to bill the patient 20%. You can't soft bill. It's against the law. Once again, Syracuse Fire Department has the best services. We're very blessed.
Because otherwise you would go to the place that does the soft billing, right? I go to the place. You would go to the place that doesn't do the soft billing, right? You would go to the place that doesn't actually make you pay the copay. That's why it's not possible, right? Like, the insurance company would throw you out of their network if you didn't collect your copays. Because the copay's there for a reason.
Well, I'm talking about Medicare. It's illegal
But
to
the
do that.
government is also insured in that.
Do you have any other statements, Mr. Butler?
I did, but I lost my train of thought. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for attending. Chief, if we can get those answers, then we'll get together. I'll get the legislation from Corp Counsel as you have written, and we'll pass it out and let the counselors review it, and we'll be back in touch. Okay?
All right.
Thank you so much.
Yep, thank you.